everybody, and welcome back once again to the channel where we are doing our next speed drawing video for Spooktober. And it is once again a request from my lovely patron, James Salter, who has today requested, both live over on Twitch and as a video, that I do the Deathslinger from Dead by Daylight, one of his favourite characters to play after the Blight. I hate the Blight. I think I've said it before. I'll say it again. The Blight is fucking awful. I think the only other one that I don't like as much is the Dredge, and that's just because I can't figure out how his fucking thing works. Just the Blight annoys the fuck out of me. Don't run in a straight line, run in a straight line. Bounce off things. I don't know what we're talking about, but we're not talking about the Blight today. We're talking about the Deathslinger. And boy, have I got some things to say about the Deathslinger. Now, I actually kind of like his design. I like the idea of a crazy, kind of Wild West, undead cowboy. You know what? I was trying to say Deathslinger there, and I was like, wait, that sheriff character that's come back to avenge himself on the world. But that's not the way this guy worked. The story of this guy is kind of both funny and sad and heartbreaking, and I don't quite understand why he's a killer, and not just like... Well, I do understand why he's a killer, because they needed killers. You can't have, like, killers that could be survivors or vice versa. Though apparently the Trapper is one of those ones that the reason that he's so warped and there's bits of metal sticking out of him is because he did actually betray the entity, and the entity got annoyed at him and was like, if you're gonna help people, I'm gonna make you suffer. And that's why he suffered, and now he's even angry at the survivors, because look, if you just behaved, but of course you didn't behave, and so here we are. We're stuck with this. There are loads of characters that I could talk about when it comes to Dead by Daylight which have the same kind of thing, where they're like, why are they killers? Or I understand why they're killers, but at the same time. For example, the Huntress. Her whole story is she loves children, and little girls especially, and it's because of the way her mother raised her. And she thinks that she should have a daughter, but she doesn't understand about certain sides of things, which is kind of cool. For her, obviously, she doesn't understand that. She sees everybody who isn't a small child as something to be hunted, so it wouldn't make sense for her to know. So seeing the small child female survivors would make her go, I'm gonna kidnap one of these and keep them for my own. But she's never allowed to do that. Anyway, we are getting sidetracked. This is Caleb Quinn, also known obviously as the Deathslinger, as I said, and he was introduced in chapter 15, The Chains of Hate, which was a chapter DLC released on the 10th of March 2020. So literally just before the pandemic, we got this guy. And I feel so bad for him, because actually he probably got an awful lot of like playtime when he first came out and reviews. He's just I've loved playing against the Deathslinger. I find him quite fun, especially when he catches you with the chain, and if you just manage to hook yourself around a corner or around a pallet, they rip the chain out, and you're like, yeah, I'm hurt, but you didn't get me, bitch. He's also a really supposedly hard killer to grasp, which I can understand, because I haven't got him myself, but I've seen some of my friends play him, and it is really difficult to kind of understand some of the projections and all that kind of thing. I find Wesker, I love Wesker, he's quite fun to play, but his hitboxes are weird. So I figure that this guy also suffers from that weird hitbox fun that sometimes happens. Our friend Caleb here was born in the dust-ridden badlands of the American Midwest. He was the son of struggling Irish immigrants, which is the same to most outlaws and sheriffs of the time. And he was on the edge of the frontier. Sickness, famine, and death were common sights, and pioneers contended for whatever scraps that they could claim, while the tycoons, of course, feasted. Not too dissimilar now, honestly, if we're looking at it properly. Nothing really changes. Caleb's father was an engineer that struggled to find employment due to his Irish heritage. What a lot of people forget is that Irish and a couple of other people were included in an awful lot of racism at this point in time, and it made it very hard for anyone, even if you had the correct training, to get a job. And because of this, Caleb's father kind of hid his tools away from the light of day, as if kind of upset that they existed, or I'm trying to think of the word and my words aren't wording today, so I apologise about that. If you can't tell, things have been a bit higgledy-piggledy in my brain recently, so I apologise for this. It wasn't until Caleb found his father's tools that Caleb even knew that his father was an engineer. However, very similar to his father, he soon became incredibly good at creating things. Two of his favourite productions would also go on to be refined over the years, and you may find them in the game itself. One of them was a prototype of his weapon, the Redeemer, which essentially, he created a gun, kind of like a giant nail gun, except it fired iron railroad spikes into the ground to make it easier for people to use it. Next, he made a steam-powered tunneling drill to make it even easier to get the railways to work the way that they needed to. However, his boss kind of treated him with indifference, even though these were major engineering marvels, and Caleb got very, very upset, rightly so, when they were found to be in other production companies. So his boss had taken the designs and sold them on, also claiming the patent, which meant that Caleb could never get any money from his creations. He was angry, very, very angry. One day, he went to Bayshore, who was his boss, and beat him to a pulp. He then took his gun and fired it at his boss, nailing him to the wall. Now, of course, this is where he would have been lynched, because anyone of a lower class didn't get really the justice that they should. The only thing that, prevented him from being hung, drawn and quartered was the fact that he survived. His boss survived. It was an impossible thing, but he did manage to survive. So in the end, Caleb ended up spending most of his life in a penitentiary, working for the prison warden, who he made friends with, and as time grew on, he built torture devices for the man. Now, he worked for the warden for a while. The warden kind of made him a mini bounty hunter and sent him out to catch people, bring them into the prison, and make him money. And Caleb did this for a while. He created a gang, or there was a gang, I can't quite find out, but eventually the warden sold the prison to guess who? No other than Caleb's old evil boss. And as they shook hands on this deal, Caleb decided he'd had enough. And the gang went through the prison, kicking down the door where the warden and the new owner were, and Caleb beat them both nearly to death, and then allowed them to be dragged out into the halls where they were summarily butchered by the other prisoners. But of course, Caleb wasn't seen again. He went back into his old cell, and the roiling mists of the entity's realm came to claim him as he sat there contemplating the blood dripping off his hands onto the cell work floor. And that's where Caleb is now, in the entity's realm, running the rat race of the trials and killing survivors. It's a pretty sad story, honestly. You'd think and you'd wish that if you work hard and you do things right, you would be respected for what you did. But obviously Caleb's story is one that tells you that no, this unfortunately is not always the case. Sometimes you've just got to bite the bullet, as the saying goes, and move on. And so anyway, this is a little derpy Deathslinger. Not sure why James requested this derpy Deathslinger, but I love him anyway. He's cute, which is probably something that would never be said to the Deathslinger's face. But as always, thank you so much for watching. We will see you next time. Take care, have fun, and goodbye.